Alright, listen up. Sonic Superstars is not the greatest Sonic game ever made. However, it does make a strong attempt at being a great Sonic game. Today, we're talking about Sonic Superstars. It's the new Sonic game that is supposedly the great return of 2D Sonic. And I know that a lot of us have been very excited for this game because as it appears in the trailers, it seems like everything that we wanted. It's a nice follow-up from Sonic Mania with original zones, and it also has an art style that breathes life into the series. And in my personal opinion, the game was a bit underwhelming. However, it's not bad, alright? This is not a bad video game, and I want to make that clear right off the bat. This is a good Sonic game that I had a fun time with. It's just that, for me, Sonic Superstars in some ways exceeded my expectations, but also didn't live up to other expectations. This game is a bit of a pretzel to tackle, so bear with me in this video. I tried my best on formulating my thoughts, and I think I've come to a good conclusion on this game. So, please watch this video until the end so you don't kill me in the comments. There's a lot I say in this video, and my thoughts aren't as simple as good game good or bad game bad. And with that said, if you're new here, make sure to boost into that subscribe button and hit the bell. Anyways, let's begin the review. As any Sonic game, let's begin by talking about the story. Now, I'm gonna be fully transparent with you guys. I have no idea what's going on with this game. I think I followed the first half of the game's story decently well, but in the second half, I don't even know what happened. From my understanding, it's another typical adventure where Sonic and the gang have to put a stop to Dr. Robotnik. However, this time, Robotnik is teamed up with a returning character, Fang the Sniper. There's also a new character, Trip the Lizard. And I gotta say, it's great seeing Fang return, but more importantly, I really enjoy Trip as a character. She's basically a dorky character that tags along with Fang in his adventures. Her main defining trait is, like her name suggests, she trips a lot. The tables start to turn later on in the game when she trips, and Amy helps her up like the good Samaritan she is. And after that, Trip becomes one of the good guys, so to speak. Until halfway through the game where she finds her truth. Oh yeah, Sonic, you go get Fang. Yeah, get that guy. Yeah. Oh, you dropped the emeralds. Hey, it's Trip, my girl. That's my girl right there. Oh shit. That's crazy. That's crazy. What the fuck? Yeah, this game's lore is pretty weird. This is also the first time where I started disliking the art style. We'll get into this later, but the graphics for this game looks great for the most part. But this dragon just looks, I don't know, it just looks out of place. When I first saw this, I seriously questioned if I was too old for Sonic. You know, maybe this game is made for babies, but why am I playing it? Anyways, the game continues until Sonic defeats Robotnik once and for all. But wait. So something is missing, something important. Where's the supersonic final boss? I beat the game with all of the Chaos Emeralds, but there's no final boss. Did they really forget about Supersonic? There's no way they forgot about Supersonic, right? Like, they can't be this tone deaf, right? Well, as it turns out, this is not the end of the game. In fact, it's just the first half of it. You know that one article that said this game was like 24 hours? I remember seeing that and laughing because there was no way this game was 24 hours long. I mean, if you really think about it, the longest classic Sonic game was like 3 hours long, and that's if you suck at it. So there's no way it could have been 24 hours, right? Well, it's not 24 hours, but it is certainly longer than the average classic Sonic experience. You should be expecting around 10 to 15 hours if you check out some of the bonus content. Like, it's a pretty long game. And all of this is because you have to play through the main story, and then you get access to Trip's story, where you basically play through the game again, except it's now 10 times more difficult. And only then do you actually get to fight the final boss. I'll go more into detail later, but I really hate that they locked the supersonic final boss behind Trip's story. I understand that Trip's story adds more context to everything, but I just don't want to play the game twice. And trust trust me. We will be getting to that in due time. Anyways, I don't fully understand what's happening in Trip's story. You sort of just play through the game again, except the new villains are the Egg Robos and Fang the Sniper. I might be wrong, but it looks like Trip is having a vengeance arc against Fang, which in all fairness is pretty cool. I'm not gonna critique the story that much because I realize a lot of the story is lore related, and I'm also really stupid, and soon enough I'm sure Sonic fans will dissect and figure out the story and tell me what's going on. I also don't want to critique it because it's a classic Sonic game. If I was to dunk on the story, it would just feel pointless. Don't get me wrong, I love the story from Sonic CD, Sonic 2, and Sonic 3. It's very well made for how simple they are. But I don't really play classic games for the story, so I don't really care that much. However, I am not going to lie, the end of the game had me spaghetti-brained. So, let me explain exactly how my experience went down. So, I beat Trip's story after struggling on the Fang boss for quite a while. I enter the final story, the story with Super Sonic, right? And then suddenly, Purple Dragon. This is my most embarrassing review because I got nothing. When I entered this fight, I bursted out laughing because what is this? Where did this dragon come from and why does it look like a villain to Sesame Street? By the way, this is the second time I questioned if I was too old for Sonic. Like, come on, you could not have designed a less cool final boss. This looks like if your toddler's son drew a dragon so you decide to hang it up on the refrigerator. I get that classic Sonic is more cute than modern Sonic, but like, come on guys, this is not cool. This does not look menacing. This boss in a nutshell is just no more Mr. Nice Guy. Like, I can't take this seriously. Okay, but besides the design, it was kind of funny the first time I saw this. Like, it was genuinely a good memory because I was with some friends playing this and Purple Dragon. Like, I can't make this up, bro. I had no context. I was just confused. After the fight, Trip seals the dragon away in an egg. Then everyone lives happily ever after. What happened? I don't know, but I think I have an idea. From the pieces I put together, it looks like Robotnik wanted to maybe capture this dragon's power, or he was at least curious about what this dragon was. I also know that the dragon is somehow tied to the Chaos Emeralds because of the mural. And finally, this one's just an assumption, but I believe Trip is the same species as this final boss, especially when you consider that both become dragons upon interacting with the Chaos Emeralds. Pretty weird, but I guess it's cool lore. I don't know, man. I'm sure the lore goes a lot deeper than what I'm saying, so once the lore gets explained, I guess it might be cool. Or maybe it won't be. After all, Iizuka did write this game's story, and the last time he did that was a disaster. Overall, the story is a story. Try to pay attention to it, but if you don't, it's fine. It's a classic Sonic game. You don't need the story to have fun. It doesn't make or break the game. At most, it makes you laugh. So I'm not going to critique the story, I'm not going to hold the story against this game, and I'm not going to praise it either. Anyways, let's talk about the world and the atmosphere of Sonic Superstars. I wanted to dedicate a section of the video to this because it's a big deal. Let's first discuss these graphics because this was a huge selling point for the game. It's 2.5D graphics, and like I said before, it's great for the most part. I still think the character models look weird. I just don't like these designs, and I never have. I think they look too friendly and cute. I want an edgier classic Sonic, kind of like the Sonic CD intro. Because this just does not look good in my opinion, and I'm never going to like it. Aside from the models, the backgrounds look fantastic. They're very detailed, and honestly, I think I'm starting to prefer 2.5D graphics over pixelation. And it goes further than just graphical fidelity. The level environments are also very new and creative. Visually, this game is fantastic aside from a few oddities, especially in the zones department. You guys have no idea, it is so refreshing to see all new environments in this game instead of just reusing old ones. And on top of that, these environments are consistently good looking while also being distinct from one another. The only downside to these zones and the whole experience of the world and atmosphere of Sonic Superstars is the soundtrack. The soundtrack for this game is all over the place. Half of the soundtrack will be the best Sonic music you will ever hear, and the other half is just so bland and boring. You have absolute bangers such as Lagoon City Act 2, which is literally a modern-day Sonic CD song. It's personally my favorite track from the game. Expect it in the background of my videos. It's just amazing. Take a listen. And then you have other songs like Press Factory Act 1, where he uses the awful Sonic 4 instruments and makes a song that sounds so bland and lifeless. And honestly, this song specifically is just insulting to my ears. It was so jarring to go from Sonic CD quality music to Sonic 4 music in a matter of one level. It was so inconsistent, and I hate critiquing this part of the game because half of the music is absolutely amazing. All I gotta say is please, Sonic Team, stop using the Sonic 4 instruments. It does not sound good, and it never has sounded good. The other half of the soundtrack that everyone is praising is the stuff we want. I have not seen one sizable crowd that enjoys this music. However, I've seen plenty of Sonic fans who hate it. Please, just do something different. Now, at the end of the day, I won't say the soundtrack is a complete L, because again, half of it is like peak fiction. Like I said, it is Sonic CD quality music. I love it. The soundtrack is a half of a W. Half. Anyways, let's move on. Okay, but what about gameplay? Is the game itself fun? Well, actually, yes, for the most part. The game controls pretty much one-to-one with Sonic Mania, which is an astronomical W. This game controls like butter, it is smooth, the physics feel great, everything about these controls is perfect down to the tiniest of details. In fact, these controls alone make the game fun to play without even getting into the level design. It just goes to show that if you put love and care into the controls for a platformer, it can go such a long way. The controls are legitimately perfect. Now, what about the level design? Well, if we're specifically talking about the first half of the game, the level design is alright. It's not perfect, but it's consistent. There was never a point in the first half of the game where I felt like the level design just dropped off. Now, the best way I could describe the quality of the level design is if Sonic 1 only had speed levels. You know, if Sonic 1 only had zones like Green Hill and Starlight. There was no Marble or Labyrinth Zone, it was just a solid game from beginning to end. That's what Sonic Superstars feels like to me. But that's not completely a good thing because I feel like it fails in some areas because of that fact. First of all, there is not a whole lot of exploration in this game aside from the giant rings. In fact, there's not much reason to explore anyway since there are no elemental shields. And since lives are gone, there's no point in collecting rings unless it's to increase the player's score. So why even explore in the first place if the most you can get is a dinky little shield? Yeah, that was kinda disappointing. There's not a whole lot of reasons to go exploring in this game. But that's not all. There's still a few more issues I have with the level design. The biggest one being the gimmicks. The game, in a weird way, almost reminds me of Donkey Kong Country. Basically, you have the minor gimmicks, but then you also had zone-specific gimmicks that were very crucial into succeeding in the level. Except, unlike Donkey Kong Country, the gimmicks in Sonic Superstars are very hit or miss. Some of the time, there'll be a fun little gimmick in the level, such as the water slides in Lagoon City or the vines from Speed Jungle. But then other times, the gimmicks will overstep its boundaries, such as Press Factory, where you have to constantly step on this button to prevent Sonic from blowing up randomly. Or my least favorite, in Capital City, there's these auto-scrolling segments. This breaks the pacing of the level, and I thought we already came to agreement that auto-scrolling levels are not made for Sonic. This goes against the entire philosophy of the only thing that can slow Sonic down is the player's skill. Or even dumber, there's this segment in Cyber City where Sonic transforms into a mouse and has to go up this wire maze to reach the next section of the level. Except the problem is that you can't turn around and there's enemies ahead of you that you cannot see. So if you go down a path, there's a chance that there's an enemy waiting there to kill you. You are relying on the fate of the universe to get past this segment the first time you play it, and that is extremely dumb. It's almost like Sonic Team and RZest were just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what would stick and what wouldn't. And unfortunately, a lot of the gimmicks in these levels did not stick. But I'm not against gimmicks being in Sonic levels. That's a crucial part of what made the classic Sonic games so special. The gimmicks provided variety within the zones. So in the future, I hope Sonic Team and RZest work on making the gimmicks a lot less significant, like how they did in Sonic 3 and Sonic Mania, or if they want to continue down this Donkey Kong Country-styled gimmick structure, that they at least get some quality control. Because some of these gimmicks are good, and some are a slog to play through. I do recognize that this is a very different style to 2D Sonic level design. It's just that I'm not a big fan of it. Although, I do think it has potential. It is innovation, and I do think that Sonic Team and RZest should give 2D Sonic another shot in the future. So yeah, I do hope they return for another 2D Sonic game, and I'll talk more about that later. The last thing I want to cover is the boss fights, because RZest and Sonic Team put a lot of work into the bosses this time around. And to be honest, I'm kind of mixed about them. First of all, some of the bosses are really easy and fast, just like the bosses from the previous classic Sonic games. But then some are an absolute slog to play through. You see, I prefer my classic Sonic bosses to be short and sweet. Nothing too ambitious, nothing too crazy, just something quick to kill at the end of a level. I like that structure because it supports the fast pacing that the other classic Sonic games have. When you're playing any of the classic games, you can complete them in about an hour or two depending on how good you are. And that's because those games have such a high skill ceiling that never restricts you on how fast you can complete a level. So when those games halt Sonic to fight a boss, those bosses are short because the game doesn't want to break the pacing. It wants to give you a quick thing to fight before they send you on your way. I love this structure to a game. Sonic Superstars, on the other hand, is very different. In this game, some of the bosses are, like I said, short and sweet, but then other bosses, especially later in the game, are long and drawn out. They're not hard aside from the final boss, but that's to be expected. They're just too long, man. And I wish this was a skill issue, because some of these bosses just have multiple phases or just really long scripted sequences. The worst boss, by far, is the Fang boss in Golden Capital Act 2. You have to play through this long auto-scroller section of the level, and there's nothing you can do to speed it up since it's a scripted sequence. In all fairness, the boss isn't bad at all. It's not poorly designed, it just takes up way too much time in the level. Every person I've seen play this level for the first time spent half of the level's playtime on the boss. And it's because it's an auto-scroller and you can't speed it up. You just have to sit through it, and it slows the game down so much. Now, again, this boss isn't bad at all. It's actually surprisingly very fun. And clearly, Sonic Team is getting better at making bosses that actually require input. I just don't think this style to a boss fight fits in a classic Sonic game. This feels like a boss I would fight in a Mario game or a Donkey Kong game. And don't get me wrong, those games have great bosses, but the short and sweet bosses is what I enjoy from classic Sonic. Because classic Sonic is always supposed to be on the go. And look, I'll be honest, after my first playthrough, I was very disappointed with this game. The level design was too gimmicky, the bosses were too long, and I felt like the other classic Sonic games had way better pacing. But I slept on it, and I slowly came to the realization that Sonic Superstars is as familiar as it is different. Like, sure, it's a game starring classic Sonic and there's loops to run through and whatnot. It's more like a traditional Nintendo platformer than it is like Sonic. And to be honest, I don't like that. I liked how unique and bold classic Sonic was. So I honestly prefer how the classic Sonic games were before Superstars. I appreciate that Superstars is innovating, but I feel like it innovated in the wrong direction. And please do not get me wrong, I love the Donkey Kong Country games. There are multiple 10 out of 10 platformers in that franchise I could never live without. Oh my god, DKC2. And I love 2D Mario. I'm going to be playing Super Mario Wonder at launch because it looks fantastic. But I don't want Sonic to be like those games. If I want a challenging, gimmicky platformer, I'll go to Donkey Kong. If I want a casual platformer to turn my brain off when playing, I'll go to Mario. But for Sonic, I want to go fast, explore, and always be on the go. So I'm not liking the direction of Sonic Superstars, but I understand why someone would prefer Superstars. It's less arcadey and more like a game. And once I accepted that fact, going back to Sonic Superstars was a lot easier. I started accepting that this isn't the arcadey, fast-paced game like the Genesis games. That's when I started to appreciate Sonic Superstars, and for anyone who is playing the game and it hasn't clicked with them yet, I recommend playing with that mindset. And thank God I managed to warp my own perspective on this game, because there was a point where I didn't want to make this video. I wanted to cancel this review because I knew I didn't like the game. To be honest, I just didn't want to go through the same song and dance of making a Sonic video where I talk in great length about why I didn't like a specific Sonic thing. I don't like hating Sonic, you know? So I had to change my perspective on the game, and while I still don't think the game is that great, I've come to appreciate it. If you couldn't tell, the Sonic burnout is strong. But I'll get through it. I'll make it past this. I will push through. I will push through for you guys. In my opinion, despite all of my criticisms, the first half of this game is a fun time. Not the greatest thing ever, but you know, it's fun. I guess the final thing to talk about is the ending. From my experience, getting all the Chaos Emeralds does not change anything about the ending. It just gives you more Emerald powers. And I guess we can talk about that real quick. The special stages are cool, I guess. They aren't fun, but they also aren't bad. So it's a W. I'm gonna be honest, the only special stage that I would actually go out of my way to play for fun is the Sonic Mania special stage. That's it. Alright, there's no other good special stages. So if a special stage is boring and not complete BS like the one in Sonic Superstars, I'm gonna consider it a W. All you have to do is swing around until you can homing attack on the Emerald. The only challenging Emerald is the green one, but once you know to just swing in front of the Emerald instead of towards the Emerald, you can get that one pretty easy. So the special stages are harmless, alright? It's not tedious, it's not annoying, it's not Sonic 2, it's a special stage, you know? Anyways, the final boss is pretty fun. Although I do think the boss is a bit too long. You have to hit a lot of rockets to enter the second phase, which is really annoying because you have to wait for the rockets to fire every time. It just slows down the boss significantly, and I'm just not that big of a fan. I want a faster final boss. But you know, we've been through this. It is what it is. Aside from that, the first half of the game is pretty good. It is really annoying that the Supersonic boss fight isn't at the end of the first half because, again, that kind of goes against how the classic games were structured before, but it is what it is, alright? It's not a traditional classic game. I've already come to this conclusion. But there's more to this game. There is a second half, so let's talk about it. Trip's story is very interesting because I'm happy it exists. I just hate that it's forced. Adding a hard mode to the game is really cool. I love that idea. But when you force the player to beat Trip's story to access the ending of the game, that is really annoying. And I get it. They are trying to justify the $60 price tag, but there are better ways of extending playtime than just making the player replay the game again. Because that's exactly what they do. They force you to play the game again, except now it's on hard mode. And when I say this is the most challenging Sonic game, I am not exaggerating. Sonic Superstars is officially the most challenging Sonic game of all time. My old video about pinpointing the most difficult Sonic game, it has been officially outdated. Trip's story has some very punishing level design. Near the end of the game, almost every level becomes Metropolis from Sonic 2, and it is so tiring. I do not like Trip's story that much. I do like the boss fight, surprisingly. I did think that was kind of cool, but the level design is just way too punishing in my opinion. Now look, it really would not be an issue. I would not be complaining right now if Trip's story was optional. That's it. In reality, this is the second half of the game, and if you want to see the end of the story, aka the Supersonic boss fight, you have to beat this section of the game. And that is so unfortunate. You know, I actually had to replay Trip's story for footage, so... Hey Matt, from the future, how you enjoy playing it again? It wasn't good. I will say that while I do think the level design is incredibly annoying, the boss fights are surprisingly kinda balanced. Now, did I get frustrated? Yes. Did I call BS when I was playing it? Yes, because they're very difficult, alright? The Fang boss was incredibly difficult. Oh my, I'm getting flashbacks. But I never had to abuse a mechanic to win any of these bosses. I never had to cheese any of these bosses to actually beat them. Now, that's not to say they are perfect. They do have their fair share of issues, but for the most part, when I died, it was my fault. So it's not like Update 3 of Sonic Frontiers where they just throw a dumb trial that you have to cheese to win. The challenge is actually better in Sonic Superstars. In fact, beating the Fang boss was one of the most fun moments I had in the game. Looking back, I spent an hour, I don't know, maybe 2 hours on that boss. But once I beat it, oh, it felt so good. I had to master every section of that boss. And I may have been cursing this game up and down, and I was mad, and I was wanting to assault innocent people who had nothing to do with it. But at the end of the day, I won through pure skill, and that's how you make a good challenge in a Sonic game. God, that was so satisfying to beat. I don't like how the bosses break up the pacing within the levels, but I kinda like them. So if Sonic Team or RZest wants to put this style of boss fights in future Sonic games, I can get down with it. Under one condition. Similar to Sonic CD, I hope in the future that they separate the bosses from the levels. Because, for example, if you're trying to replay Act 2 of Golden Capital, you have to go through this boss every time, and it causes me to not want to speedrun the level. But, you know, if you move the boss to the third act, then, you know, that would solve the replayability aspect of these levels. So Sonic Team or RZest, if you're watching this video, try to do that. That'd be really cool. You're probably not watching, but it's a good idea and I hope it comes through. Overall though, if I'm ever returning to this game, I'm probably only going to return to the first half, unless I need footage or I'm doing a challenge run. Because the level design and Trip's story is just way too annoying for me to return to willingly. I also don't like playing the game twice. I came to this conclusion with Sonic Heroes, and it's the same conclusion here. Anyways, let's move on to the conclusion of the video. This was a challenging video to write. With a game like Superstars, it innovates so much that you almost admire the audacity of the developers. But at the same time, you also kinda wish that the game stuck the landing a bit better. Is this game worth playing? My answer would be yes and no. First of all, there is no justifying that price point. I don't think the game is nearly as replayable as Sonic Mania or Sonic 3. $60 is just asking way too much, and to keep it 100% with you, I hate to admit this, but if I wasn't making content, I do not think I would have bought the game. Especially since Super Mario Wonder and Spider-Man 2 are releasing this week, and while I haven't played them yet, I'm anticipating that they'll be far more worth the price tag. And it sucks to say that, because I hate when Sonic fans do that. They always use other franchises to one-up their own favorite franchise. And I swear, some of you will take any chance to compare Sonic to some unrelated game and ultimately say that Sonic could never be as good as that game. I hate that we normalized expecting Sonic to always be mediocre. We can't ask for games to be too ambitious. We can't ask for games to come out a bit more polished. Because, hey, you gotta remember, this is Sonic, and Sonic doesn't have any good games, right? Except this time, I don't really blame anyone. Sonic Superstars is yet again another good first step towards something greater. I hate that we've had to say this for the past two Sonic games, but there's not much we can change about it. Sonic was in a terrible place before Sonic Frontiers, so I guess it should have been expected that Sonic has to climb out of this hole. You can't just expect Sonic to be great again after one game. He has to find his footing, right? So I hope Sonic Superstars gets a sequel, because while this game isn't perfect, I feel like it could be amazing. If Sonic Team and RZest can pull it together and make a sequel that fixes all of the issues and complaints with Sonic Superstars, we can have a fantastic 2D Sonic platformer. The same situation goes for Sonic Frontiers 2. It's just more annoying with Sonic Superstars because Sonic Mania already got 2D Sonic to where it needed to be. But we don't have the Mania team anymore. We have a new team. A team that is ready to experiment, ready to tackle something huge, and ready to deliver greatness. As dumb as it sounds, I have faith that Sonic Team and RZest are growing developers. They're getting better and they're experimenting more. We might be seeing the best golden age for Sonic very soon. We just have to be patient and get past that first step. Anyways, this was my review. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. I love you guys. I'll see you very soon. Peace out. My chill members are Snack Pigeon, Sinpai KC Literature, Neil, Scully, AHS Francis, T218, Sonic Man 7153, Monic, ArchXYZ, Pie Studios, Bananas, Junion Rings, Chip Chap Chop, The Squeaker Nerd, Super Shack Spoom, and Super Saiyan Sonic. Thank you all for supporting my channel. Make sure to click one of the in-card screen videos here. Love you guys. Peace out.